Welcome to Just Stories. We hope you enjoy the story. The Austro-Prussian Conflict, a 7-week showdown, by Just Stories. Chapter 1, Prelude to War, Tensions and Alliances 1850s to 1860s. Welcome to the first chapter of the Austro-Prussian Conflict, a 7-week showdown. In this chapter, we will delve into the political and diplomatic events leading up to the war, including the formation of the German Confederation, the rise of Prussia as a dominant power, and the tensions between Austria and Prussia over control of the Confederation. In the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, Europe was in a state of upheaval. The balance of power had shifted, and new nations were emerging. In Germany, a loose confederation of states had formed under Austrian leadership, but the balance of power was beginning to shift towards Prussia. As the largest and most powerful state in Germany, Prussia saw itself as the natural leader of the German people. Its king, Wilhelm I, and his prime minister, Otto von Bismarck, were determined to establish Prussian dominance over the Confederation and to create a unified German state under Prussian leadership. This put them at odds with Austria, which had long held the leading position in the Confederation. Austria had a large and powerful army, and it was backed by a powerful network of alliances with other German states. Austria saw itself as the guarantor of the Confederation's stability and feared that Prussian dominance would upset the balance of power and lead to conflict. The tensions between Austria and Prussia came to a head in the 1850s and 1860s. In 1864, Prussia and Austria went to war with Denmark over the disputed territories of Schleswig and Holstein. Prussia emerged victorious, but the conflict only served to heighten tensions with Austria. In 1866, these tensions boiled over into full-scale war. Prussia had formed an alliance with several German states, including Bavaria and Saxony, while Austria had the support of several other states, including Hanover and Hesse-Kassel. The stage was set for a showdown between the two great powers of Germany. In the lead-up to war, both sides began mobilizing their armies and preparing for conflict. Bismarck was a master of diplomacy, and he worked hard to isolate Austria and convince other German states to support Prussia. Austria, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain its position of influence and control in the Confederation. As the situation escalated, Europe looked on with concern. Other powers, such as France and Russia, were wary of a conflict that could upset the balance of power and potentially draw them into the fray. Diplomatic efforts were made to prevent war, but ultimately, they were unsuccessful. In the next chapter, we will explore the mobilization and strategy of the two armies as they prepared to face off in what would become known as the 7 Weeks' War. But before we move on, let's take a moment to reflect on the complexities of this period in European history. It was a time of great change and uncertainty, and the tensions between Austria and Prussia were just one of many factors contributing to the instability of the era. Nonetheless, it is through understanding events such as these that we can gain a greater appreciation for the past and a better understanding of the present. Chapter 2, Mobilization and Strategy, Armies on the Move, June 1866. Welcome to the second chapter of the Austro-Prussian Conflict, a 7-week showdown. In this chapter, we will explore the initial stages of the conflict, including the mobilization of armies on both sides and the military strategies employed by Austria and Prussia. As tensions between Austria and Prussia reached a boiling point, both sides began mobilizing their armies. Prussia had a significant advantage in terms of military power, with a larger and more modernized army. However, Austria had the support of several other German states, which gave them a numerical advantage. Prussian King Wilhelm I and his chief of staff, General Helmuth von Moltke, devised a bold strategy to defeat Austria quickly and decisively. They planned to concentrate their forces against the Austrian army in Bohemia, a province of the Austrian Empire that bordered Prussia. If they could defeat the Austrians there, they believed they could quickly end the war. To accomplish this, Prussia had to mobilize its army quickly and efficiently. The mobilization process was complex and involved the coordination of soldiers, supplies, and transportation. Prussia relied on its advanced railway system to move troops and supplies quickly, allowing them to concentrate their forces in Bohemia faster than Austria could respond. Austria, meanwhile, was slower to mobilize, due in part to the complexity of its alliance system. The Austrian army was also more spread out than the Prussian army, making it more difficult to concentrate their forces. Nonetheless, they were determined to defend their territory and maintain their position of influence in the German Confederation. The first major engagement of the war occurred on June 27, 1866, when Prussian troops crossed the border into Bohemia. The Austrians had anticipated the Prussian attack and had dug in their positions, hoping to defend against the Prussian advance. However, Prussian tactics and technology proved too much for the Austrian army, and the Battle of Nacked resulted in a Prussian victory. From there, the Prussian army pushed on towards the city of Königgrätz, where the main Austrian army was waiting. The Austrians had dug in their positions around the city, but the Prussians quickly surrounded them and began a siege. The two sides clashed in a series of battles and skirmishes, with both suffering significant casualties. However, the Prussian army's superior technology and tactics proved decisive, and on July 3, 1866, the Battle of Königgrätz took place. It was a crushing defeat for the Austrians, and it effectively ended the war. In the aftermath of the battle, the Prussian army advanced into Austrian territory, capturing the city of Prague and forcing Austria to sue for peace. The 7 Weeks' War was over, and Prussia had emerged as the dominant power in Germany. In the next chapter, we will explore the battles and campaigns of the war in more detail, including the tactics and leadership of both sides. But before we move on, let us take a moment to appreciate the complexity and skill required to mobilize and deploy armies in such a short period of time. The technological advancements of the time played a significant role in the outcome of the war, and it is through understanding these factors that we can gain a greater appreciation for the events that shaped the world we live in today. Chapter 3, Battles and Campaigns, The Front Lines, June-July 1866. Welcome to the third chapter of the Austro-Prussian conflict, a 7-week showdown. In this chapter, we will explore the major battles and campaigns of the war, including the clashes at Nacked, Schleswig, and Königgrätz, as well as the siege of Prague. We will examine the tactics and leadership of both sides, as well as the casualties and impact on civilians. The Battle of Nacked, which took place on June 27, 1866, was the first significant engagement of the war. The Prussian army, under the command of General Ludwig von Benedict, had occupied the town of Nacked in an attempt to secure a foothold in Bohemia. The Austrian army, led by General Eduard Clam-Gallas, attempted to dislodge the Prussians, but was ultimately unsuccessful. The battle resulted in a Prussian victory, with the Austrians suffering significant casualties. From there, the Prussian army pushed on towards the city of Schleswig, where they encountered stiff resistance from the Austrian army. The two sides engaged in a series of battles and skirmishes, with both suffering significant casualties. However, the Prussian army's superior technology and tactics proved decisive, and they were able to capture Schleswig on July 1, 1866. The main Austrian army, under the command of General Benedict, had entrenched itself around the city of Königgrätz, where it awaited the Prussian advance. The Prussian army, led by King Wilhelm I and General Helmuth von Moltke, began a siege of the city, hoping to force the Austrians to come out and fight on their terms. The two sides clashed in a series of battles and skirmishes, with both suffering significant casualties. However, the Battle of Königgrätz on July 3, 1866, proved to be the decisive engagement of the war. The Prussian army, with its superior technology and tactics, was able to defeat the Austrian army, which was suffering from poor leadership and a lack of coordination. The battle resulted in a crushing defeat for the Austrians, with over 40,000 casualties. The Prussians, on the other hand, suffered just over 9,000 casualties. The victory allowed the Prussian army to advance into Austrian territory, capturing the city of Prague and forcing Austria to sue for peace. The impact of the war on civilians was significant, with many towns and cities being caught in the crossfire. The siege of Prague, in particular, was devastating for the civilian population, with many being forced to flee or seek shelter from the fighting. In conclusion, the battles and campaigns of the 7 Weeks' War were marked by significant casualties and the use of advanced military technology and tactics. The superior leadership and coordination of the Prussian army proved to be the decisive factor in their victory over the Austrians. The impact on civilians was significant, with many being caught in the crossfire and forced to flee their homes. In the next chapter, we will explore the diplomatic efforts to end the war and the implications of the peace treaty for the future of Europe. Chapter 4, Diplomacy and Treaty, the Aftermath, July-August 1866. Welcome to the fourth chapter of the Austro-Prussian conflict, a 7-week showdown. In this chapter, we will explore the diplomatic efforts to end the war, including the intervention of other European powers and the negotiations that led to the Peace of Prague. We will also discuss the implications of the treaty for the balance of power in Europe and the future of German unification. As the Prussian army advanced into Austrian territory, other European powers began to take notice. France, in particular, was concerned about the growing power of Prussia and the potential threat it posed to French interests. French Emperor Napoleon III attempted to intervene in the conflict, but his efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. Diplomatic efforts to end the war continued, with the intervention of other European powers such as Russia and Italy. However, it was ultimately the negotiations between Austria and Prussia that led to the Peace of Prague on August 23, 1866. The treaty confirmed Prussian dominance over the German Confederation, with Austria losing its position of influence and control. The treaty also created new political entities, such as the North German Confederation, which was led by Prussia and included most of the northern German states. It also paved the way for the eventual unification of Germany under Prussian leadership, which would occur in 1871. The Peace of Prague had significant implications for the balance of power in Europe. Prussia had emerged as a dominant power, while Austria's position as a major European power was severely weakened. Other powers, such as France and Russia, began to reevaluate their alliances and strategies in light of the new balance of power. The treaty was also significant in terms of its impact on the future of German unification. The creation of the North German Confederation was a significant step towards a unified German state, which would be achieved just a few years later under Prussian leadership. In conclusion, the diplomatic efforts to end the 7 Weeks' War were complex and involved the intervention of other European powers. The negotiations between Austria and Prussia resulted in the Peace of Prague, which confirmed Prussian dominance over the German Confederation and paved the way for the eventual unification of Germany. The treaty had significant implications for the balance of power in Europe and would set the stage for future conflicts and alliances. In the final chapter, we will examine the legacy of the Austro-Prussian War and its place in the broader context of European history. Chapter 5, Legacy and Impact, the 7-Week War and Historical Context. Welcome to the final chapter of the Austro-Prussian conflict, a 7-week showdown. In this chapter, we will examine the legacy of the war and its impact on Europe and the world. We will discuss the ways in which the war influenced the course of events leading up to World War I and the lasting effects it had on the development of modern warfare. The legacy of the Austro-Prussian War was significant, both in terms of its immediate impact on Europe and its place in the broader context of European history. The war marked a turning point in the balance of power in Europe, with Prussia emerging as the dominant power and Austria's position weakened. The new balance of power would set the stage for future conflicts and alliances, including World War I. The war also had a significant impact on the development of modern warfare. The use of advanced military technology and tactics, such as breech-loading rifles and rail transportation, set a new standard for future conflicts. The war also demonstrated the importance of coordination and strategy, as the Prussian army's superior leadership and coordination proved to be the decisive factor in their victory. The war's impact on the future of German unification was also significant. The creation of the North German Confederation paved the way for the eventual unification of Germany under Prussian leadership, which would be achieved just a few years later in 1871. The unified German state would become a major European power and a significant factor in the events leading up to World War I. In addition to its political and military impact, the war also had significant social and cultural effects. Nationalism, which had been on the rise in Europe, was further fueled by the war and the desire for national unity and identity. The war also had an impact on the arts, with many writers and artists reflecting on the war and its impact on society. In conclusion, the Austro-Prussian War was a significant event in European history, with far-reaching effects on politics, military strategy, and society. Its legacy can be seen in the development of modern warfare, the balance of power in Europe, and the eventual unification of Germany. Understanding the events of the war and their impact can help us gain a greater appreciation for the past and a better understanding of the present. Thank you for watching our story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss out on our next video.